Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Levine, and I'm Executive Director here at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or NYMTC. As the Downstate Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, NYMTC is proud to provide a collaborative planning forum to address transportation-related issues and develop regional plans through our members' shared vision for the transportation network that connects New York City, Long Island, and the Lower Hudson Valley. Thank you all for participating in today's Brown Bag webinar. Please note that this webinar is eligible for one certification maintenance credit from the American Planning Association. You'll find more information about this in the chat. Today, we're pleased and excited to have a presentation from Jane Morales, Mobility Program Support Specialist, and Joseph Senda, Mobility Studies Lead from the Special Projects Unit of the New York City Department of Transportation. Jane and Joseph will provide an overview of New York City DOT's Mobility Dashboard, an interactive platform that uses transportation data collected from various agencies to show how people move around New York City. After today's presentation, we will use WebEx's polling feature to collect some feedback from you about the Mobility Dashboard. Following the presentation and poll, there will be an opportunity for questions. Please type your questions into the WebEx chat box, and we will address them during the Q&A portion of today's session. Before we get underway, though, I hope you'll take a moment to let us know via the chat who you are and where you're joining us from. This helps us learn more about our audience and plan future webinars. Lastly, please mark your calendars for the next Brown Bag webinar coming next month. On Thursday, January 9th, MTA will discuss accessibility upgrades in their 2025 to 2029 capital plan. More information on additional webinars in 2025 will be announced in the coming weeks. Thank you again for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Jane and Joseph for their presentation. Jane and Joseph?
Thanks very much, Adam. Hi, I'm Joseph Senda. I'm the Mobility Studies Lead in Special Projects at New York City DOT. I'm joined by Jane.
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm the Mobility Specialist Support. I work with Joseph, also in DOT.
So we're going to talk to you today about the Mobility Dashboard. We're going to start by just showing you how you can access it yourself. So Jane's going to share screen. It's really easy. You just Google New York City Mobility Dashboard. You can find it very easily. We Google it a lot, so it comes up quickly. There it is. And the page has an explanation of the Mobility Dashboard, a lot of the background information, what came before it, and how it works. In the summary, what's shown as the summary, that's the actual dashboard. It's based in a program called Microsoft Power BI. And let's just go to the 6th page. We're going to demonstrate how you can manipulate the dashboard to whatever questions you want to ask. So, for example, within transportation mode, you could select cycling, and then through a span of years, let's say you want to pick 2010 to 2015, you could just isolate those years, and then you can zero in on the exact set of data you want to do. You can do this for all of the graphs throughout the dashboard. So this is for you to explore on your own time afterwards, and we hope you do, and that we'll be able to get more feedback from you as you start to dive into it. So now we're going to switch over to our PowerPoint presentation. All right. So this is the mobility dashboard. Jane, why don't you go to the next slide and start with the overview.
Okay, so this is the overview of the Mobility Dashboard, which is an annual report by the DOT that shows transportation trends in New York City. It was originally a PDF. We decided to move it to a dashboard, essentially, because we can frequently update the data as it comes in. As you saw earlier, we can use it for customization, allowing users to modify it based on their data needs. So it was funded through New York Metropolitan Transportation Council's Unified Planning Program, work program. with money from the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay. Thank you. So what's the purpose of the dashboard? What can it do? It supports transportation planning. So there are several things that we look to the dashboard for. Trend analysis, it's tracking the same things each year. Event impacts, we really see COVID-19 very strongly in a lot of the images throughout the dashboard. How things are going forward, what we should be thinking about in terms of prioritizing, how we are doing with regard to sustainability and equity goals as well. These are all important things that the dashboard is useful for and supports.
So in this slide, we show basically what the central business district is, because people using this for the first time may not exactly understand what it is. So we took a picture from one of the hub-bound reports from NYMTC, basically showing the sectors coming in from the different areas. So basically, the central business district is, the central hub of New York City, where there's the financial and commercial heart of Manhattan with, the key business, financial, and cultural institutes. And the regional connectivity is basically it's accessed by the residents, the businesses, tourists from all 5 boroughs of New York City, as well as New Jersey, which all heavily rely on efficient, and sustainable transportation systems within the central business district.
We are looking at this through the hopeful lens of congestion pricing coming into effect in 2025. And if and when it does, the CBD, or the Central Business District, will take on an even more important role, as it'll be the lens through which we'll see how that program is affecting transportation in the city.
So the first graph we have is basically talking about people entering the central business district and the number of people. So what the data in this one is capturing, which we will show on the next slide, is basically personal vehicles, which is the modes of transportation we captured as personal vehicles, buses, subways, ferries, and bikes and commuter rails. With this, we're basically looking at the commute trends, basically, which tracks the shifts in transportation use over time, and commuters traveling basically within the central business district.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. We want to see how trends of how people are going into the central business district are changing over time, as it is a key factor in our sustainability goals. It was featured in Plan NYC. We also want to credit the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council's hub-bound report, as that is the source of data that underlies this page. Okay, back to you, Jane, for what are we seeing here?
So basically in this graph, what we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, is the number of people entering the central business district with personal vehicles, buses, subway, ferry, bike, and commuter rails. The data we have is from 2010, 2022, because we're still awaiting the 2023 hub-bound data. What we see here is basically how New York City was on track to reach an 80% sustainable mode for people entering the central business district before COVID. And then once COVID hit, as we can see, everything went down because we were in restrictions. When everything eased up, the mode started increasing, but still not at pre-pandemic levels. In 2020, though, we did have a driving spike, but that was because of people essentially needing to commute from work or using it to the store and everything.
It'll be really interesting to see, especially, as I said, if congestion pricing comes into effect, how this changes going forward 2025 through the rest of the decade. We're hopeful that we do have the sustainability goal that we do reach that 80% mode share, but time will tell on that. Next slide.
So the next graph we're going to look at is population, employment, and tourism by year, which what this captures is annual changes in the population, the employment, and tourism between 2010 and 2022. And some of the highlights that we're going to see, it's basically how the transportation systems are driven by population growth, the employment trends, and like the tourism that spikes that we get.
Okay, so we can see how demand, how all of these are drivers of demand and how that is changing over time. The lowering of the population is creating a smaller base to draw on for all of the modes of transportation. The rise in employment is making it more likely that people are traveling, as most jobs still at least have some in-person component. So the employment growth is good for increased mobility in New York City. And then on the next slide, we've got tourism. And so with tourism, we were at a peak in 2019. It dropped in 2020, obviously, or due to the pandemic. We expect 2024 to be back at 2019 levels, and perhaps will be a record-breaking year. We will see as that number comes out next year.
So the next graph we are going to look at is sustainable transportation modes by year. Here, the three that we looked at is cycling, which is the annual number of bike trips, the bus ridership across public and private bus networks, and subway ridership. And we're looking at, again, between 2010 and 2023 to see the shifts in commuters' preferences and more towards sustainable options.
The sources here are the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, where all of the transit data comes from. And then ferry comes through to us through the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. Cycling has our most complicated methodology, but it's because New York City the New York City Department of Transportation has worked over the past 15 to 20 years to develop this statistic in a comprehensive way. We're quite confident in it as a stat, but it is a complex methodology using many sources, including the American Community Survey.
So for this graph, what we're seeing is the three modes that we spoke about from 2010 to 2023. We had an increase of bike usage, subway and bus ridership were going down. COVID hit, everything went down across the board, and we weren't able to get any bike estimates because the American Community Survey was only able to get at the state level. So there was no New York City specific data available for cycling. Post-pandemic, excuse me, the numbers are rebounding, still not pre-pandemic levels, except for cycling, which has actually increased.
So post-pandemic, we're hoping to see transit continue to rebound. It remains unclear if the work from home is going to have a permanent depressing effect on transit ridership. But other trends are also in place, such as rising tourism, so time will tell. Cycling, if anything, was boosted by the pandemic because more people were concerned about the health issues of riding within transit vehicles. But cycling was already trending up and it's just continuing to rise. So that is a good sign for sustainable transportation.
So here we have household vehicle registrations by year. The type that we that we capture is we track it yearly, vehicle registrations for private households, which is cars, motorcycles, trucks, etc. And these reflect trends in vehicle ownership, which is like influenced by, again, population growth, the economic conditions, and the availability of the different types of alternatives of modes for transportation.
We could go on to the graph.
Yeah.
Thanks. So the source is the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles. It's a huge database. It includes all of the vehicles in the entire state. So there's a pretty complicated methodology. We've worked closely with the New York City Department of City Planning to create a methodology for analyzing that and using the same methodology each year so that these household vehicle registration statistics are comparable. So Jane will go over what the trend is here.
So as you're seeing in this graph, the number was going up and then started to decline, and then when COVID hit, because of the need for people to basically go to and from a place, the numbers spiked in 2021, but have since declined since restrictions have eased. So people are using other modes besides personal vehicles.
So this is going to be affected by lots of different factors. It's not just the number of vehicles in each household. There's also how our households changing, where people choosing to live are the places that are growing more car-oriented or not car-oriented. So this is a complex variable. So it'll be really interesting to see how this progresses for the rest of the decade. It could go either way.
So for this graph, we capture annual trips for our taxis, for hire vehicles in New York City from 2013 to 2023. And these are on the side, you can see the different types of taxis that we were talking about.
You can go on to the graph. So the data source here is the global positioning systems that are within taxi vehicles and for hire vehicles. We learn of each trip as the fair begins. It marks it. We have a huge sorry, Jane, you'll go over the trend that we're seeing.
So the taxi data we have is from 2013 to 2023. For hire vehicles and green taxis, we don't have from before that. We only have from 2015 to recent. Yellow taxis have been in decline even before green taxis and for hire vehicles were implemented. As we can see, for hire vehicles were at peak 2019. COVID hit, the numbers went down, but still not a lot compared to yellow and green taxis. They've continued to rise, not to pre-pandemic levels, but will most likely reach that level probably within the next year or two. Yellow taxis have steadied, whereas green taxis have remained in decline.
So for planning, we certainly are living in a world that is mostly post-street hail. So we're thinking about how people are using their phones, and it is changing how the curb operates and how we're thinking about these types of vehicles going forward. The street hail livery, the green taxi, it still exists, but it was also overtaken by technology in the same way that yellow taxis were. Most of the role of the green taxi has essentially been taken over by the app-hailed vehicles or the for-hire vehicles.
So in this one, we're looking at average taxi speeds by year within the central business district and the Midtown core area. So this we track the taxi speeds in each and to see basically how the congestion is, especially within the central business district.
You can go to the graph. The data source here is the global positioning system in the vehicles. The data is collected in a collaboration between the Taxi Limousine Commission and the New York City Department of Transportation. It's a huge data set, so it's quite complex to analyze, but we're really appreciative of being able to get this download each year. So Jane will explain the trend.
So here we're looking at data from 2010 to 2023, where we see that for both the taxi speeds within the central business district and the midtown core speeds have declined over the years. Obviously, the anomaly, but with the anomaly being COVID, where the numbers went up due to the lack of cars being on the road and remote work. Since then, the speeds have dropped once again since there are more people back out. And we're looking forward to, with congestion pricing, if it does actually go through, for those speeds to once again go back up to ease the traffic within these areas.
I just wanted to note that we zoom in on the Midtown core, the part of the Midtown that's the center of the center, the densest, the highest number of workers and office space and tourists, as it's always slower than the central business district as a whole. And as Jane says, we'll see weather, and then once congestion pricing starts, how it'll have an effect on all these things. And with that, we will turn it over to Carolyn for a brief poll.
Hi, thank you so much, Joseph and Jane, for your presentation. I learned a lot about the mobility dashboard, and I think everyone got to see some really cool trends that are going on in the region. We want to ask a couple of poll questions about the mobility dashboard, how you might use it, and ways that the dashboard could potentially improve. So if you go to the 3 dots on the far right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a tab that's labeled polling. You'll want to answer that, and I'm going to open the poll in a moment. Once the poll is open, you'll see there's about 6 questions. It'll take a couple of minutes to fill out. If you're not seeing all of the questions or all of the text in a questions, you can certainly resize the window to be able to read the full question. And if you have any questions or would prefer to just answer the questions in the poll in the chat, you can certainly do so. So I just opened the poll. And thank you so much for taking the time to provide some feedback.
Are we going to analyze the questions that are in the chat during this time?
I think we were probably going to wait on those a little bit, but I don't know if you wanted to talk through some of the questions in the poll. Just
Sure.
to give people a little bit of
we could just read through them.
Yeah.
So let's see. Carolyn, would you actually have the full text of the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first question we're asking, and I'm seeing a lot of people already answering it, is did you know about the mobility dashboard before the presentation? A follow-up question to that, did you know about the mobility dashboard before the presentation? And if you knew about the mobility dashboard, did you use it before the presentation? We also want to know if you're planning on using this after the presentation, which data fields you find most useful. Which data fields in the mobility dashboard do you find most useful? So the number and percentage of people entering the central business district. Sustainable modes of transportation by year, population, employment, and tourism by year, household vehicle registration, annual taxi and FHV numbers, and the average taxi speeds by year. We also want to know a little bit about how you're planning on using or plan to use the mobility dashboard. Would you use this for planning, reporting, project management, or something else? You can certainly fill that out in the chat. The last question we would have is how to improve the mobility dashboard, and that's an open-ended question. So I'm seeing about half of the audience has already finished the poll, and we will certainly give some time to everyone to finish completing. I know that there's a handful of folks still filling it out.
I feel like we should play a little music or something till the timer goes off.
I mean, the majority of the meeting has filled it out. Do you think we could move on to the discussion?
I'm seeing that 9 people are still actively working on the poll, so
Okay.
you can raise a flag as soon as everyone's over.
Is it finished? The remaining time stopped ticking down.
One moment.
Okay.
I think, Adam, while we finish up the polling, I think it's you
Yeah.
can start to take, you and Stephanie can start.
Well, we certainly can. I mean, I've got a couple of questions myself. So if it's all right, I'm gonna throw a couple at you, and while we're working through the poll, I mean, I guess I'm curious, even though it's kind of mentioned in the poll, what your feedback has been from the users of the mobility dashboard. Who is using the dashboard from your perspective? If you have some awareness of that, and you know what they're able to do with it, are you getting that kind of feedback from people?
We know that this is being used quite a bit, both internally in the New York City Department of Transportation and among our colleagues, many of whom are members of the council. It's intended to really be for public consumption. So we are trying to make it more user-friendly and would love for further feedback on how it could be even more so user-friendly. But the intent is for New Yorkers and people from the region to understand how the transportation system is working and what are the trends on an ongoing basis. So it's really for the people of New York City as a whole.
Very cool. Caroline, ready to go, or need a little bit more time?
Fidel, I'm not able to reopen the poll. Do you know what's going on? It looks like it froze.
Should be a lot of people still voting, maybe.
Seriously? I don't know what happened.
It's
Just a second.
showing up as frozen on my end.
It says there's a remaining time of 1 minute and 33 seconds, but the time limit of 5 minutes, but it just stopped. So I agree with Caroline. It looks like it's frozen to some capacity.
Well, while we're working on that, can I throw you guys another question? Before we put the ones in the chat, there are questions in the chat, and I hope people will still enter more questions in the chat. But so I saw that you did have a category in there for cycling, and I was kind of curious, as micromobility develops and people are using scooters, e-scooters, e-bikes, you know, whatever other forms there may be, how are you able to capture some of that evolving micromobility information?
We are adapting, trying to go at the faster than the speed of government. or as fast as we can anyway. We're repositioning even how we're talking about it. Uh, we have traditionally had a bicycles unit or a cycling unit, and that is now bicycles and micromobility has to be thought of together as this broader category. As the vehicle types expand, even the lanes they currently have a bicycle painted on them. Maybe they're going to have a multiple things painted on them in the future. We do get some of those statistics. They do feed in to it, and it'll be on us to see whether it makes sense to combine those going forward or break them out. Where New York City Department of Transportation has implemented a few e-scooter share pilot programs in the Bronx and Queens, and so those numbers are growing. City Bike factors into this bicycle number. As I mentioned before, it's a very complicated calculation for how we try to figure out the number of cyclists in the city. But City Bike is a great asset for those stats because those stats are automatic and comprehensive for all City Bike rides across the whole year.
Yeah, that's a great resource for the data. That's terrific. I had one last question, and then we can jump into the chat questions if we're not ready with the poll, which was, and I think there was a question in the chat that's related to this, or similar to this, but the personal vehicle trend of the number of personal vehicles going down, I'm wondering if that, I guess, trend matches the population reduction that's gone on in the city, I guess the purported population reduction. I don't know if anybody's tried to rent an apartment in New York City. I think they might question whether population's actually gone down, but it's supposedly gone down a little bit, and I wonder if that might track with the vehicle ownership or registrations, or if you've even done that kind of analysis of why that number is going down.
We haven't done that exact comparison. Okay. It's one of the things we'd love to further adapt with the dashboard. So one thing you could do would be to isolate the years you're looking at on both of those dashboard pages, and you could compare side by side to see the trend. I know that the New York City Department of City Planning has a whole population division, and their transportation division is also deeply immersed in the vehicle trends, as it has quite a bit of effect on land use.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're on the call, but if you had to pin me down on who I would want to go to answer the question, I would say the Department of City Planning is key for this conversation.
I would agree with you, and maybe we can follow up with them another time. So are we okay with the poll, or should we jump into the chat questions? Still seeing 1:33 on the poll. Maybe we need to go into the chat questions now.
Chat questions.
Go ahead and go to the question, Sharon.
All right, then Stephanie, I'll turn it over to you if that's all right.
Sure. Yep. Moving back to the subject about the vehicles, there was a question that said, given that many or even most people have not been paying for bus rides, how are these numbers counted? Is there any data on number of people using various newer motorized modes, mopeds, scooters, rather than bikes, bus, or subway?
Okay, so the second question, I believe Adam already got in there with that question. With regard to the counting, whether it's all based on fares, my understanding is that it's not. That there's a counter that's independent of the fare payment. At least on buses. I'm not sure about subways. We do take the data from the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and I believe they do scrutinize it because they need to know if people are paying or not. If we're at crush load on a bus or subway, they have to plan for that. So I believe they do take it into account. Again, if there's anybody on the call who has more knowledge of it, or certainly anybody who's from the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, we'd love to hear further insight.
Thank you. And then regarding vehicle registration, that it's gone down, would this include vehicles registered in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Texas, other places, or just New York?
Texas. Yeah, I don't believe it does. So what we were able to do is compare the same number each year to see the trend. I don't think it's a useful tool for understanding the exact number of physical vehicles that are within the boundaries of New York City. That's sort of an impossible number to calculate. I mean, even this number is incredibly difficult because there's so many nuances. There's so many nuances to the data, and the data is so messy. But what I would say is that we're looking at the trend more than anything else by comparing the same thing each year.
And then also to the vehicle registration question, could the recent decline in registration also reflect the trends around illegal plates, or is that just too small to really make a difference?
That's not something that we've considered. I don't know. I don't know the nuances of the law on illegal plates. Like, I would guess I'm getting into guess territory here that your insurance company isn't going to want to see that you don't have a registered vehicle. So if you're avoiding the toll with a fake plate, you still might, your insurance company might still want you to be registered.
Thanks. And then the other questions are more responses to the mobility dashboard and the poll questions. The first response here is my poll automatically submitted. I'd say that for people willing to look at charts and tables and draw their own conclusions, this is great, meaning the mobility dashboard. But I think it would make sense to provide some conclusions similar to those in previous reports to help less savvy people look at it and understand what they see. And
I
then
don't know if
another,
that's something we're supposed to respond to or just.
Adam, your thoughts? Do we record this comment or have a response?
I don't know if it needs a response. It was just a
Just
thought
feedback.
that you're sharing. Yep, thank you.
Yep. Then there is a question. This is certainly helpful information. And then a question: would it be possible to look at the data at a more granular scale within the central business district? Like, for
I see.
example, Hudson Square Business Improvement District, that kind of thing.
Oh. Not with the dashboard. I think that if that bid or I don't know if that person is calling in representing that business improvement district wanted to delve into the data at a more granular level, we would have to work with them and see and work with the data source partners as to how much of it can be made publicly available, and more so just whether it does exist at a more granular level. That I know I used to work for a business improvement district. I know that the Hudson Square area struggles with the amount of traffic related to the Holland Tunnel. And I'm sure that there would be resources probably available to look at that, but it's a Port Authority facility. You'd have to work with Port Authority.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If I can jump in just a little bit briefly on that one, Stephanie. I mean, we actually, there were a couple of references made to the NYMTC Hubbound report and the data that we do gather that was used in the mobility dashboard. And so, some of that data, it comes from the agencies that submit the data, as I know Jane and Joseph both know. And so, it's going to be going through that screen line that goes around Manhattan. So it may not necessarily be specific to a particular bid or or census tract or anything like that. But there may be some of the data, like you mentioned, Joseph, like the city bike data, because those are specific stations that are located within an area that may be able to provide some of that information to smaller, areas. So I'm just sharing our experience. But anyway, back to the show.
Thanks, Adam. And here is a response to the reasoning behind the mobility dashboards. This is from the DOT respondent and from the DOT. The mobility dashboard replaces a previous requirement from the New York City Council per a 2008 law that the New York City DOT should generate a hard copy report of mobility patterns in the city. This used to be the Sustainable Streets Index. Since the way information is consumed has evolved since then, we have now transitioned to this digital format that permits even more current updates. And so we don't have to wait for a hard copy to be released after a long lag time. So this is just, a little more historical information about the reasoning behind the mobility dashboard. I don't know, Joseph, if you had anything to say about that, or it's just adding to the discussion.
Absolutely. I appreciate the comment of my colleague. We are responding to technology. We don't live in a world of paper reports anymore. So it's not only for the feature of the user being able to modify the data that they're seeing. It's also so that we can, at any given month in time, for example, I think the first in our data calendar, the first thing that comes out is MTA, Metropolitan Transportation Authority ridership. So we can grab that number in, let's say, February. It might come out January, February. We'll grab that number early in the year and put it in the dashboard, and it won't have to wait for when we'll when we do a comprehensive update of absolutely everything. And potentially in the future, the dashboard could even pull through programming the number as soon as it's posted. That would be in the medium term. We hope to be able to do that.
Excellent. There is a thank you from the Hudson Square Business Improvement District to all your responses to their question. And then there is buses have a sensor comment. I lost the thread of what that was in response to.
I think that was
sure.
That was the question about, if there are people who are not paying the fare, how are they counted? And so they're saying that there's a sensor on the buses, which is what I suspected that.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I think that's the case.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
There we go. We followed that up. Question of whether their presentation will be shared. Yes, it will. We'll be sharing a recording of this and the presentation to attendees in the coming weeks. There is another DOT comment here. As to securing more granular data for some neighborhoods, Adam, to your question, that could be a later iteration, but it is not currently available, at least not from the city DOT. Beyond the hub-bound screen lines, but it could include specific polygons. So that's just additional follow-up to the granular data question.
So I would link that with the poll. In some ways, we will adapt it based on what people are telling us. So this is one effort to start to develop feedback, and the desire for more granularity is very useful to us, and to know how we can adapt and improve this tool. I don't see there's no reason why we couldn't do it. So we will certainly look into it, but we can only do so much, and it has to be the effort has to equal the demand in some way. We're not going to do a whole big revamp if we don't have a defined audience for it.
So I'm going to just ask, since we're still trying to figure out what happened to the poll, we don't want to lose this opportunity to get you that feedback. So if folks want to type into the chat, some of the features that they'd like to see, or some of the features that they've used and have really gotten some use out of, we do have a few minutes. So while you guys, hopefully, whoever's still, listening in, could type in some of those suggestions, I would just also like to mention one of the issues that we've had, and this has actually been kind of helpful for me to listen to, is we produced that hub-bound report that you referenced. And one of the issues that we have sometimes is there may be, even though the data is gathered in October, very often the agencies, we may not hear back from one or two agencies until much later the following year, and that kind of holds up our releasing the actual full report until the next calendar year. So the 2023 report that we're working on right now won't come out until 2025. But the way that you guys do it is something that I think I'd like us to explore, which is, you put the data out that you've got and you add to it as the data comes in, and it gives folks something to actually take a look at. So something we'll certainly consider. So thank you. And while I did a little bit of fill there, I'm hoping that was enough time to give folks a chance to type into the chat box.
Yep, we do have some comments. There was a question about just a note that there's a community board representative here who would love granular data. So that is, we're getting a push for that. And then another comment about granular data, it would be great to add a data breakdown by borough as well. And these chat questions will be recorded and sent to you as well.
Do we know which community board that was? I'm just curious if they could.
I don't. They would
pop
need to
that in
put
there.
it in.
Yep, I
the
understand.
chat.
I'm just kind of asking the person. There we go.
Brooklyn, the community 2. I
Okay,
think.
great.
Brooklyn 2.
And yeah, another one. I know that. There we go. CB8 Manhattan.
Second on the community board data.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, community board 8 in Manhattan. Excellent.
Can
There
we
is
make a
also
hub bound for every single community board.
We're not taking that on. No.
It says
Although
on
it
there,
would be
each
cool.
website
It
has
would be
their own
cool, but
community
yeah.
board bound data.
But yeah, that
Um,
said, I think that this is one of the issues is, the data is what it is. We have a screen line of a certain area. And so CP2, I guess, technically in Brooklyn is on the sending to Manhattan side of one of those. So it might be relevant. Some of the portals are there,
Sure.
but some of them are just, they don't touch the the central business district. So the granularity doesn't exist, or it has to be logical, right? A lot of the other statistics don't break down very easily once you get to something like the community district level. So we'd really have to think through this thoughtfully. It's not a simple translation. It's not like we have all of this and we're holding it back. It really has to be thought through. The census answers that build into our bicycling data, it's unclear to me if that could actually be broken down any farther than it is. So, but noted, and it's not that we don't want to do it, but we have to see where we can do it and where it makes sense.
And to follow up with that, there is a question that was sort of a two-parter. The partnering with companies like perhaps a company like Replica would be interested in partnering to further insights on granularity. And then ask, in terms of more of a question here, is the DOT using travel data models like Replica to supplement the data sources or calibrate other sources?
We do look at these sources. We treat them with some healthy, I don't want to say skepticism, but scrutiny. They're based on models, and we can't just trust it. We have to look at how they are doing the calculations. And so we have to get into very deep and important and complex dialogues about what does it really mean. And I think all levels of government have to deal with this as to, what do we accept as a true fact? If it's something that's coming out of a model that, seems to have been tested, I think we're still based in a world of what is the traffic count? What is the hard data? I don't know that we're ready to make the leaps. There's probably pros and cons to doing so, and I don't know. I don't know how NYMTC is thinking about it as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It is sample data, so it probably can do a really good job, perhaps, of giving trend information, but actual hard numbers is going to be a bit more of a challenge, or translating those samples into hard numbers is a challenge. But I think there was a follow-up question, or was that?
To different subjects. Is there more discussion on this subject, or can we move on?
I'm going to move on. Okay,
so this is going back to the presentation talking about green taxis. This commenter says, when you say green taxis, that is for a specific license to operate. Maybe you could split out BHV FHVs to identify the number of trips in ZEV mode. I'm sorry, I don't know all these acronyms. Not sure how to peel off from the aggregate VHV number, but there are about 12,000 BEV FHVs out there. I hope
BEV.
that
Okay.
was clear.
Battery-
That's battery
Yeah,
Is
electric.
it
just
battery
kidding, I'm
electric
sorry.
vehicle? I think
Yeah, I
it
think
might
that's
be
battery
battery
electric
electric
vehicles.
vehicle. Okay, battery electric vehicle.
When you were saying green taxis, I guess I thought you meant outer borough taxis. Did
Yeah,
you?
yeah. So there's a
Not
taxi
actually
that's
green.
literally painted green. It was
Right.
a Bloomberg era policy when you know that it was just right before the Uber and Lyft really took off, and so there was a moment. It actually was a long history of, just due to economics, yellow medallion taxis were in the central business district or in Manhattan south of 96th Street for the most part. And so it was very, very difficult to hail a medallion taxi. It wasn't economically beneficial for them to be in northern Manhattan and other boroughs. So they introduced this license that is specifically for those areas. It's called a street hail livery. And to be more technical, perhaps in our presentation, we could have used that technical term, street hail
Yeah.
livery.
The color,
Um,
right?
Yeah, yeah. And as
I
to
live in the
whether
Bronx. I've taken them. Yeah.
as to whether
I know
they
what you mean.
happen
They're like
to
the
be,
ride hails.
yeah, as to whether they happen to have
They're green.
electric or battery, you know, that just would be circumstantial. Um, and as I said in the presentation, the Ubers and Lyfts have kind of made them a moot point. They still exist, 1 million rides a year. That's not nothing, but it's really, really small compared to the other vehicle types.
Yeah. And then moving, it was just it would be interesting to see trends in BEV ownership registrations for both FHV and personal household vehicles. I think again, BEV and FHV.
Right. So battery
Operated vehicles.
yeah,
for
battery
both,
operated
right,
electric vehicles, and then for hire vehicles.
for hire
So
vehicles.
how much are the whole personal vehicle world
Yeah.
transitioning to electric vehicles, and then the world of professional drivers, those vehicles, how are those vehicle types switching in the new world of electric vehicles growing exponentially?
Exactly. Thank you. Between us, we got this. And then there's another comment here. Eager to learn more about the many motorized modes and current findings and recommendations for how best to rethink current travel routes to better manage the new trends going forward. I think this.
Non-motorized. Is that what
Many motorized modes.
Many
Eager to
motorized
learn
modes.
more about the many motorized modes and current findings and recommendations for how best to rethink current travel routes to better manage the new trends going forward. So I think the many modes that are recorded, maybe, that are on the dashboard.
Was also talk about the micromobility trends and
And the
how
micromobility,
scooters
exactly.
and
Yeah,
everything is
micromobility.
growing. And,
scooters,
yeah,
that kind of thing. Yeah, yeah.
which is a good question. I think
Yeah.
we're all eager to learn about that.
Yeah, yeah. And with micromobility, we probably do need to create some kind of graphic and see what the data can tell us at this moment in time. We need to start soon so that we can start creating some kind of trend analysis. We know that it's growing, but by how much and with whom is going to be tricky. But we have to start somewhere. So with 1 year of data, we could start building on it going forward.
It's just a follow-up on the acronyms. BEV, definitely battery electric vehicles, ZEV,
Okay.
zero emission vehicles, and BEV could also include hydrogen. And then following up when our discussion on micromobility, just confirming, yes, micromobility, currently struggling with the issue in a park, but it's everywhere. Then there is another question here. Is there any plan to expand the coverage area beyond the central business district and get to like the county municipality level in this dashboard?
To expand to the county, so beyond the boundaries of New York City, or that's what it's getting at?
I think because you focused a little bit on the central business district, but you did go, the dashboard goes beyond the central business district for some of those categories, right? For like the for-hire vehicles and other things. It does actually already go beyond the central business district, I thought, but
does.
please correct me. if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah. We're looking at New York City statistics.
Okay.
And so but I accept that breakdown by borough would probably be helpful for some people, and again, where the data allows and where it makes sense, I think that's a potential growth area for us. An open question to NYMTC if there's an interest need to make this regional. I think to go beyond the boundaries of New York City, that we're New York City Department of Transportation, so we would need to partner both on getting the data and just having the mandate to go beyond our boundaries. But I think we'd be open to it, but it's a real rethink, because currently it's within our website, it's focused on our area, which is just the 5 boroughs.
Thank you. That is the end of the chat comments so far. I just put in the chat the link to our APA planning page where you can get a continuing education credit, a certification maintenance credit if you're interested. And that is all from the chat so far.
Adam, do you want to check the polling questions? I don't know. I mean, I have them available, but
Is Caroline available to run through them we've got 5 minutes or 4 minutes if we can do it pretty quickly.
I can share the screen with the polling questions if you need to.
Let's see.
Okay, that sounds good.
It's going to have to be quick though,
Okay,
so we might just share it, end up sending it out to folks later. But if you could pull it up quickly,
Yeah.
Fidel, that would be great.
Of course.
Okay.
All right.
So we were able
Just
to.
let me know when you want me to scroll down. Sorry. Go ahead.
Worries. We were able to hear back from a number of folks about the mobility dashboard. A handful of people had heard about the mobility dashboard before the presentation, but majority had said no or did not answer the question. If you'll scroll down, Fidel. Next question, which was, did you use the mobility dashboard before the presentation? A few folks had, but the majority, again, this will be the first time that they're using the dashboard, or if they had heard about it and they hadn't used it yet. If you would please scroll down. However, more than half of the folks in the room said they're definitely interested in using this mobility dashboard after this presentation. So I hope that everyone learned a lot about the dashboard. Again, if you have any questions about the dashboard, you can certainly reach out to the mobility team at NYC DOT, and they'll be happy to take any feedback or answer any questions. And then let's get a little bit more granular about the details. So what data fields in the dashboard do you find most useful? I'm seeing that sustainable transportation modes are certainly a topic of interest for most folks on today's call. We're also seeing that data about the central business district being helpful, population and employment and tourism by year, and kind of followed up by percentage of people entering the business district. So thank you. Next question. As far as using the mobility dashboard, this clearly has a lot of value for planning and lots of different ways that people can use the mobility dashboard for planning. We'd love to hear back later on how you're using this in your planning, reporting, and project management. Next question, please. And our final question, lots of good ideas on how the mobility dashboard could be improved, both here and then in the chat that we've had. So thank you so much, everyone, for the feedback, both during the question and answer and in this poll. We really appreciate it. I know NYC DOT is going to have a lot to look over in the next couple of days as they review this data, but thank you. And I'll pass it back over to Adam.
All right, great. Thank you, Caroline, Stephanie, Jane, Joseph, Fidel, everybody, the entire team. It's been a really great webinar. I've learned a lot. I've gotten some great ideas. I hope everyone has. Hope everyone goes out and explores that dashboard. I think the link has been put in our chat a couple of times. Also, a reminder that everybody that needs the certification credits, please click on that link so you can go to the APA website and get those credits. And without further ado, I'll let you guys go, but I'll just remind you again, we've got our January 9th webinar with the MTA on accessibility improvements. Other than that, have a wonderful holiday season, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.